Hey everyone, Dr. Tim and Hillary for another Dr. Tim's Aquatics podcast. How you doing this morning, Hillary?
Doing good. Still coming down off the high from the show last week.
Yeah, everybody, we were at the Global Pet Expo in Orlando last week, and it was crazy good show. Lots of customers, lots of people, introduced many new things, which you can, where can they find the live feeds and stuff we did, Hillary?
You can find the live feeds on Instagram, and I imagine we'll try and put a copy of those over on the YouTube channel as well. And then I can link that on Facebook.
Yeah, but not only the Dr. Tim's, we've got ASF and Reptile Systems and a sneak peek at our hydroponics product that is, or just the first of products that's coming over from our new partners in Singapore. So there is a ton of stuff going on.
Yes.
Yeah.
So much excitement.
Yeah. So, well, let's get to the questions, Hillary. Where are we today?
All right. So this is almost late in the month, but our March Q&A. We got a lot of cycling questions today, but also some questions about new products. So let's jump on in. Hello, I have a tank that I cycled with one and only months ago. Just last week, I added a few fish. I was planning to get more one and only and start adding when doing water changes. My question is, after reading about EcoBalance, can I add both? I have a 55-gallon tank that's bare bottom. It does have textured ABS plastic sheets on the bottom and the back, with only a hang-on back skimmer and a Fluval FX4 canister filter.
Do we know if the tank was cycled, but it's been empty?
Yeah, it was cycled, but it's been empty. I guess they cycled it a couple months back.
Yeah, but if they've been adding ammonia. So
doesn't sound like it.
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend adding EcoBalance right now, since the tank has been empty and no ammonia's been added. The nitrifiers aren't dead, but they slow down. They kind of go dormant a little bit. So what I would do is, in stages, add some ammonium chloride to the system, ammonia drops. Make sure the nitrifiers are working, and then start with the EcoBalance. The reason I wouldn't add the EcoBalance right away is that the EcoBalance bacteria, being heterotrophic, will grow so much faster than the nitrifiers that you're going to they potentially can steal the micronutrients, the phosphate and other things that both bacteria need. All bacteria, all living organisms need phosphate. And in a new aquarium, generally phosphate's very limiting, and the EcoBalance bacteria can grow so fast that they would steal all that, and the heterotroph or the nitrifying bacteria wouldn't grow well. So I would not add them together. I'd wait for the EcoBalance.
Okay, sounds good. Question number 2. My skimmer went crazy about 8 hours after I put a waste away gel in. Is that normal?
It can be normal. I mean, the gel, there's no gel release or chemicals in there, but it is an organic substance. It's 100% natural organic substance. So yeah, it can go a little crazy, but it depends on your skimmer. We don't get that very often. I can't say but I can't say it's never going to happen. So yeah, it's normal, and your skimmer should remove any of that stuff and get back to normal pretty fast. And the other thing we get a lot of is that, especially if it's the first time you've used a gel, you might start seeing a growth, this snotty growth on the outside of the gel itself, which is bacterial biofilm. That's a good sign. Nothing to be worried about.
Nope. And actually, the last podcast we did, I think we talked about that, because I remember getting a photo and putting that in the video. So if you are listening to this, go over to YouTube and watch it so you can see a visual of what that slimy stuff looks like.
Yep.
you'll know it's not a concern. Okay, question number 3. Hi, I'm currently cycling a new Fishless 120-gallon saltwater tank. I put a bottle of the Reef One and Only in my tank 19 days ago and have dosed it with your ammonium chloride as it stated in the instructions. I'm using RODI water. My ammonia went from 2 to 0 by day 12, but my nitrite has stayed around 2. Is it normal for it not to drop 19 days after adding the bacteria? I'm testing my water every day and all of my parameters are in spec except for the nitrites. The nitrates are about 40.
So my first question would be to this person, are they using live sand? When we have cases like this where the nitrite is hanging around, it's usually due to the fact that there's live sand in there. And I don't know the actual reason why this happens. Just seems to be very common. Live sand, high nitrite, or not high nitrite, it's not high. I mean, 2 is not a high value, and nitrite at that value is not toxic. It's just kind of a pain. But it's got to do with the live sand somehow in slowing down the nitrite oxidizing bacteria. Is it nutrients or micronutrients or some trace nutrient that the live sand is taking? That's a good possibility, but I don't know the full, the exact answer to that. Generally, if you do a water change, that helps get the nitrite bacteria jumping. You can add a little bit more bacteria and just be patient, but it's not a problem to start adding a few organisms with that nitrite at 2, as long as it's processing the ammonia. And it'll eventually go down. But I think we've seen this a lot, Hillary, where when you use live sand, the nitrite just seems to hang at these low levels for a while.
Yeah, it's tricky. And like you said, you could probably go ahead and add fish, but even if you do add fish, take it easy and do not overfeed. Please do not overfeed.
Yeah, just definitely take it easy, but a water change usually tends to jumpstart the process.
Okay, moving on to question number 4. This is a salt question. We talked a lot about the salt at the show, so I'm excited to see a question about the salt in this list today. How long can the salt be stored for before it loses its values? And maybe you could touch on some of the different values that this person is questioning.
So, but do they mean salt as the powder or salt after it's mixed up? Because the answers are vastly different.
Well, I don't. Let's do both of them.
Oh, okay, we can do that. So,
that was just the question, so I don't know what specifically they're talking about.
You can't read their mind. Come on.
No, not yet. I haven't developed that superpower.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure that's the first superpower I'd want. But okay, we're not going down that rabbit hole. Anyways, so the salt in the box, in the bag, not mixed up, just right from the factory, that's going to last a long time. I mean, salt is preservative, so anything in there's no bacteria, there's no organisms that are going to change that. It's not open to the air. It's sealed in a bag. Even in the bucket, it's in a bag. So there's not going to be much oxidation going on. So as long as you keep the powdered salt in a relatively dry place where, there's not humidity and high humidity in the bag, it shouldn't affect it. That salt's going to be fine for a long, long time. Not going to be a problem. Once you mix up the salt, and that's one of the key things about the reef evolution, is the salt will mix clear in a couple of minutes or less, and the pH will stabilize in 10, 12, 15 minutes, and it's ready to go. So you can use it, and you should use it right after that. What's going to happen if you store it? Well, because there are vitamins in this reef evolution and some organic compounds to feed bacteria, some of the vitamins will oxidize once they get, if they're sitting around, even in aeration, but they're just water soluble and they're going to oxidize over a few days. It just depends on the vitamins. Some of the organics will also be utilized and can be, depending on your source of water. If your bucket or can is clean, a lot of people, they don't really clean their mixing container very well, and over time it develops a slime, and that slime is bacteria. And if you mix a new salt, if you mix the Reef Evolution in that, because we have organics and vitamins to help stimulate bacterial growth, you're going to stimulate the bacteria growth that are on the side of the mixing vessel, and so that they'll use that up. So we recommend you really use the salt within 24, at most 48 hours. There's no real benefit to having the salt bubbling for a week or two before you use it. This is not, your grandfather's salt. It's mixes clean fast, clear fast, and is meant to that you can use it quickly, and the pH will stabilize fast compared to other salts.
When I initially read this question, I was thinking in terms of a home hobbyist, but I used to work at a local fish store, actually a couple of them. And when we would make salt, we would make like 400 gallons at a time and then use it over the course of a couple of days. So I wonder now if this was referring to a local fish store that wants to make large batches at a time, if they're selling it to customers and stuff like that. So you could still do that.
You can still do that. I mean, if you want to make it, if you're a fish store and you want to make it that salt that you sell, that's fine. It's just that some of the compounds in there are not going to be completely available after a little bit of time, after days or weeks. Yep.
I think we made salt like 3 times a week. So we went through it fairly quickly for the volume. Next question is about Refresh. I just started using Refresh this morning to eradicate dinos from my small 40-gallon tank. I notice in your recipe, you indicate the importance of using a skimmer once I get to the waste away part of the schedule. What if I don't have a skimmer? I do have filter floss and I can change that daily. Will that suffice?
Well, it all depends on the filter floss. What we're trying to do is that the Refresh starts to inhibit and attack the dinos and organics. And then what you're trying to do is get all that organic material out of there. And that's what the skimmer does. The waste away bacteria, take care of that organic material, break it down, and then in the dissolved organic form, the skimmer can remove it. They also can feed on it, and that's where the filter floss comes in. But when you say filter floss, I mean, once again, Hillary, there's just such a wide variety of filter floss, because you need that filter floss to act as a fine mechanical filter. So really a micron filter bag would be better than filter floss, and then change that because it'll get clogged up by all the bacterial biofilm or all the biobacteria that's growing as a result of the degradation of the organics and things like that. But if that's all you have, yes, just realize it's not the perfect solution, and it may take time also for that filter floss to start clogging up and working. And a lot of people, once it clogs up, they want to change it or throw it away. But that's when it's actually good for this purpose, because you're trying to filter out. You're having to use mechanical filtration to remove the bacteria, whereas with the skimmer, the bubbling, the bacteria get attached to all that type of stuff, and also the skimmer removes many types of dissolved organics before the bacteria can even get to it. So that just helps. Skimmer's best, but a filter floss can work. It's just you're going to have to be patient and realize you may not get the best results. The other thing is that if you're having stubborn case of dino, chances are one or both your phosphate and nitrate are super low or unreadable. And that is a problem. You need to get those values up for a long-term fix in your system. Your phosphate should be 0.05 or so, and your nitrate should be, around 7 to 10. If you don't get those up, then the dinos are just going to come back. We've seen this too much. We've read it, heard it, talked to people. It's just in those super low nutrient tanks, you've really forced the system such that dinoflagellates can dominate, because what are we trying to do? Normally with the waste away gels and the waste away, we're trying to grow bacteria in the water column to outcompete the dinos. But if you don't have some phosphates and nitrates in the water, you can't grow those beneficial bacteria in the water column to outcompete the dinos. And that's how dinos take over. We take all this equipment and eliminate the bacteria. And then for years, and still I get people telling me today, they read it in the internet that, the best thing to do is have no phosphate and nitrate. And I can pretty much promise you, if you keep your system with no nitrate and phosphate, you're going to have dinos, and that's going to make your life miserable.
And no one wants that.
No. This is supposed to be an enjoyable hobby, not work.
Yes, enjoyable.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Question number 6. I'm doing a fishless cycle, and I am on day 5 using ocean direct sand, aquacultured coral, not live rock. I followed or am following the directions for the ammonia drops and then added the one and only. Currently, as of day 5, ammonia is 0.25. Nitrites are at 4. Should I add more ammonia drops since my nitrites are at 4? I don't want to lock up the cycle.
Well, this tank is right at the edge. It's only day 4. First off, the ammonia oxidizing bacteria are not going to starve. They're doing fine. So in this case, I would say let the tank ride for another day or two, and then you can always add 1 drop, a quarter dose, 1 drop per gallon or half dose, 2 drops per gallon of ammonia. Adding the full dose is a lot of ammonia. We do that on purpose because we assume people want their tank and their biofilter really working. But if you're only going to have a few fish, you don't have to do that. And in this case, where the nitrite bacteria are lagging a little bit, you cut back. There's no wrong way to do that, as long as you don't let the ammonia and nitrite get super high and then keep on adding. So recap, I'd wait another couple of days and then start adding a reduced amount of ammonia, and the tank will click in. And I would say, in 6-7 more days, day 12 to 14, your tank will be fully cycled.
Woohoo, that'll be good. Okay, this question it sounds like it's from a local fish store or somebody that services aquariums. I have a client struggling with high phosphates. We add GFO to bring it down, but it always climbs back up. I was wondering if you have a bacteria that will help to keep it down and stable. Thanks.
Okay, so first, little bit of microbiology 101. We talk about the nitrifying bacteria, and they convert ammonia to nitrite to nitrate, which the base there is nitrogen, but it's different forms of nitrogen. For phosphate, there aren't the phosphate we're talking about is the PO4 minus, the soluble reactive phosphate. And there aren't any bacteria that change that to something else. While there's organic phosphate and inorganic phosphate and soluble reactive phosphate, it's all this PO4 3 minus more or less, and with the organic, it's attached to something. So the only way to use bacteria to reduce phosphate is through assimilation. There isn't we have nitrification. There isn't phosphatication. I just made that word up, folks. That's not a real word. Don't look that up. I made it up. But so there isn't like you change PO4 3 minus to PO, for 2- or PO3 or some other thing that doesn't exist. So the only way to do it is assimilation, where you basically use bacteria to grow more bacteria. And I've had some people, because we have this in the some of the recipe cards and on the website, and people get confused about it. So assimilation is basically where you are incorporating the phosphate into the cell rather than using bacteria to change it to a different form of phosphate. Am I clear so far, Hillary?
Yeah, so far so good.
So I mean, that's what the waste-away gels do. That's what the liquid waste-away does. All bacteria, because phosphate is generally a limiting substance. It's what growing bacteria on the NP-active pearls do, is you're adding bacteria to the system, and they need phosphate, a form of nitrogen, generally nitrate, and then some type of organic carbon. With those three major nutrients, the bacteria will grow. And how they growing? Well, as they're growing and making more bacteria, doubling and doubling and doubling, they're removing the phosphate from the water and incorporating that into their cells. And that's called assimilation. So if you have high phosphate, look at what your system is. Are you doing everything under the sun? You've got a UV, you've got a skimmer, you've got a roller mat, you've got GFO, you've got all this stuff. More than likely, the issue is that all the unintentional consequence of all this stuff is you're limiting the bacteria in your system. And since the bacteria can't multiply, they can't assimilate the phosphate out of the water, and it just keeps on getting worse and worse. And eventually you'll probably just get a big algae bloom. It's something that grows on surface, right? Because all those devices don't remove anything that grows on a surface. So you're almost a ticking time bomb to get green hair algae or something like that. So what's the fix then? First, as I've said 1,000 times, put your skimmer on a timer. No reason to run the skimmer 24 hours a day. The skimmer is the number one bacterial removing device, unless you have a super powerful UV. But put all that stuff on a timer. Let the bacteria in the water column, live. Free the bacteria. How's that, Hillary?
I was just thinking about your last podcast where you're talking about the bacteria need a home.
Yeah. Okay. We're not going there. But anyways, let the bacteria multiply in the water column. These heterotrophic bacteria grow very fast. So just a few hours each day will allow the bacteria to grow. They remove the phosphate from the water, and then you turn the skimmer back on and remove the bacteria. That means you're removing the phosphate. You're turning phosphate into bacteria using the skimmer to remove the bacteria. It's not going to happen overnight, but it should start coming down. The person doesn't really give any values, right?
No.
Folks, it really helps if you give values. I mean, I know it just helps because, when you say it's high, is it 1, 10, 100? Because if the values are super high, also look at, are you overfeeding? Is there some type of dead spot in the system that you can be producing phosphate, or your values are 0.8 or 1.0 and you can't get them down lower? That's a lot different than if your phosphate's, 10 or 15. And yes, we've had people with values that high and higher. So it helps if you give us a little bit of an idea of where your phosphates are.
And that goes for any of the cycling questions or a lot of your questions. The more detail that you can give us in bulleted form, the better.
Yep.
Let's move on to question number 8. I have a 100-gallon mixed reef aquarium with a red cyano problem. I'm currently following your refresh and waste away dosing program. I'm on day 5, and although I have so far dosed 2 times the 50 milliliter of the refresh, I'm not seeing any visible drop in the level of cyano. My question is, should I continue dosing refresh every 48 hours until the cyano is clear, or start adding waste away on day 7 as per the program? Thanks in advance and best regards.
Thank you. And doesn't sound like the person removed the cyano to begin with. The first step in the
Okay.
direction is to physically remove as much cyano as you can, because this is a numbers game, and right now the numbers, you favor the cyano because they're all over the place. So just adding the refresh to a tank full of cyano without disrupting the cyano, without trying to physically remove with a net, siphon, whatever you can do to remove as much cyano as possible, you're not going to make much progress, to be truthfully, because there's too much of the cyano there, and we have to be careful about, you would never want to just kill all the cyano at once super fast, which is really not what refresh does, because cyanobacteria, some types can release toxic substances. And so if you kill too much at one time, you risk losing all your fish and all your corals. So that's why the first direction is get in there and physically remove as much as you can, disrupt the system, then start with the refresh and try to, get the numbers to favor refresh bacteria more than cyanobacteria. So at this point, I wouldn't start with the waste away. I would be a disruptor and get in there and disrupt the system and get as much of that stuff out of there as, physically as you can.
Yep, absolutely. And if you need some tools to use that, I would, depending on, you got a 100-gallon tank. So I would even go as far as to use one of the small siphon tubes. Those help you get more stuff out. And also a toothbrush. Might seem strange, but they are very helpful.
Yeah, just usually cyano with a little bit, not too much work, can be loosened off of corals and rocks and stuff like that. But and again, so the refresh will start knocking back the cyano, but then you got to use the waste away to get rid of the organics in the substance, because generally cyanobacteria grow in polluted areas. My tank's not polluted. Well, how about your substrate? Do you clean it often enough? Do you, are you gravel washing that? Because the buildup of organics in the substrate, also dissolved organics, that helps fuel the growth of cyanobacteria. And then the other one is, what's your nitrate values? If your nitrate is super low, below 5, that favors cyanobacteria, because cyanobacteria can fix nitrogen right from the atmosphere, or the water. There's so much nitrogen, not nitrate, but nitrogen. And the cyanobacteria, that's their, little niche in the aquatic world, is they can fix atmospheric nitrogen. And when you have super low nitrate, you're limiting the growth of bacteria. I think it was just the previous question or 2 questions ago, where the person I was talking about, phosphate and assimilation and gets too low, you'll get dinoflagellates. Well, if you get too low of nitrate, you generally favor cyanobacteria, because again, the bacteria can't grow in the water column. Remember, you need phosphate, nitrate, or carbon. Now we've eliminated or drastically reduced nitrate. What's going to grow in that spot? Cyanobacteria every time, because they can get the nitrogen needs, the nitrate, they need right from the atmosphere.
Let's see. Question number 9. I'm just finishing up this cycle on an 80-gallon aquarium. This will be an artificial reef with a sand bed and a fish-only system. My question is, how do I dose beneficial bacteria to control the algae?
Well, how about not get algae in the first place? Sorry, I didn't mean that as a kind of a smarty answer, but marine systems don't have to invariably or get algae. Now, the best thing to do in this case, you're going to have a fish only system. That generally means you're going to have either a lot of fish or you're going to have several big fish, which means this person wants to feed. The most economical way to do this is to use biopellets. And I'm not exactly sure why biopellets seem to have fallen out of favor. I mean, there's some horror stories. There's horror stories with everything. The issue with biopellets. Now, if you don't know, biopellets are little beads, and they're biodegradable plastic. Their primary use is to make biodegradable plastic bottles and plastic forks, but it's plastic only because it forms a polymer. The base substance is not oil. I mean, most plastics were originally made from, or it still are to a great extent, made from oil, and they last in the trash and in landfills and in the ocean forever, or a long, long time. Biodegradable plastics are not made from oil. They're made from plants. They're made from some type of organic material that is fed to bacteria. The bacteria form these polymers, and then you harvest the polymer material from the bacteria, and you can form plastics. And to form plastics, you have these beads. The beads are poured into a injection mold machine, heated up, and then they make the shape. And so you buy these biodegradable pellets, this biodegradable material in a pellet form. And that's what we talk about biopellets, because of what it looks like. And the problem with biopellets, the reason they got a bad name for years ago, was in order for the biopellet to melt at the correct temperature and easily form, different types of chemicals and substances had to be added to the biopellet. And then some unscrupulous companies would buy these biopellets in bags that are the polymer, the material made by the bacteria mixed with chemicals, and they'd sell it as the latest, greatest, best biopellets, and they were cheaper because they're not 100% pure. And as they start to decay in the aquarium, they release these substances and tanks would be wiped out. So people started, as we're prone to do, lumping all biopellets together. Our biopellets are 100% biopolymer. There's no chemicals. They can't be used to make anything because they're not, they haven't been mixed with anything. And what's happening in there is, as I said in the earlier question, you need phosphate, nitrate, and carbon. In a fish-only tank, you're going to have lots of phosphate and nitrate. That's why you're thinking about growing algae. But what you can do, though, is grow bacteria, because it's not everything, every tank, but a lot of times in fish-only tanks, what do people add is they add a UV and they add a big skimmer. So those two different, yeah. So what?
So let me tell you what their filtration is. I feel like I should do that now.
Okay.
They're gonna have a fleece roller filter. They are gonna have a media reactor, a protein skimmer, and they will have artificial reef inserts, which I feel like maybe could cause an issue for holding detritus.
Okay, so the roller filter, that's a bacterial remover. All these things remove bacteria from the water column, but they're going to have all this phosphate and nitrate and light, because of course we want to see the beautiful fish. And so you're going to grow green algae. You're setting the system up to grow green algae. So getting back to how you prevent that, put in a canister filter, a reactor, or not a canister filter, but a reactor, where you can tumble the biopellets. The bacteria will grow on the biopellets and they will assimilate, remove the phosphate and nitrate from the water, producing more bacteria The carbon they need is from the biodegradable pellet. Because they're growing on this pellet, also, they're not going to be removed by the UV or the skimmer or the roller filter until the biofilm gets big enough on the pellets. And since the pellets are moving, they run into each other and they kind of slough off the biofilm, which is what we want. And the biofilm goes into the water column and then is removed by the roller filter, roller mat, or the skimmer, which is exactly what we want. So you have nutrients, you have bacteria growing in a spot where they're protected. Those bacteria are assimilating the phosphate and nitrate. When the bacterial biofilm becomes big enough, a piece will break off and float through the water and then be removed from the system by the roller filter or the protein skimmer. And you're fighting getting algae because you've got bacteria in the system that can remove those nutrients. And then you've got a way to remove those assimilated bacteria, completely removing the nutrients from the system. And that's how you fight getting algae in the first place.
I like that. Set yourself up for algae-free success.
Yeah, set it up from the beginning. Cycle the tank and then get going with the biofilter. And keep your roller mat and keep everything else you want to do on there. It's hard to convince people, and that's okay, because they think the UV will kill diseases. And there's another, not all UVs are the same, for one. Not all disease-causing organisms, bacterial, parasitic, and things like that, they need different levels of UV. And so, the UV is a real science. What it does pretty well, though, is kill free swimming bacteria in the water column, which are the guys you want. Don't cheap out on the UV if that's what you're going to use, but also get a really nice, I'll put a plug in for the Bashi reactors. It's what we sell and recommend. They're great engineered. They're worth every dime. And our bio pellets, and you're really setting up the tank for success from the beginning rather than waiting until it looks ugly and then battling algae.
Nobody wants that. Let's move on. Question number 10 is another question about the salt. Is there bacteria in your new salt?
No, there's no bacteria in the salt. The only way bacteria would survive in a salt is if you had it in separate packaging, not touching the salt. And it's like, what? Well, remember, before there was refrigeration, how the ancient mariners and people even today live around the world is they use salt. That's why salt was worth more than gold, in many areas, because that's how you preserve food. The salt kills the bacteria. That's why you have salt preserved fish and all sorts of other things. So if you just were to add bacteria to the salt's basically going to more or less kill the bacteria. It sounds great for marketing purposes, but you'd have to add a separate vial, have the bacteria in a separate pouch or something like that. And we have it in the bottles, in the pouches, and in the new reef shots, which is much easier to add and control rather than burying it someplace in the salt.
Yes. Have we talked about the reef shots? We have, right? I feel like so much has happened since our last ASF product podcast.
Yeah, we did. But you're the keeper of the podcast, Hillary.
Maybe we need to revisit those.
Yeah, put that on a schedule for one of the next podcasts.
That'll be our next one. They're so exciting. The fact that we got to see them and mess around with them this past week. Yeah. We'll talk about them next.
Yeah. And no, they're not whiskey and vodka.
Wouldn't that be a fun marketing campaign?
Don't think that's what we're gonna do.
I know. Don't want to risk anybody accidentally taking shots of it.
Yes.
Okay, where are we at? Let's see. Question 11. Hi, I just started dosing EcoBalance in my 3-year-old reef tank. What should I expect from dosing this product long term, say the next 6 to 12 months?
It's really hard to say. Based on experience. If you've never dosed EcoBalance before, in the very beginning, and I'm just being honest with people, is you might see a little algae. Why is that? Because what are these bacteria? They are, even though they're probiotic, they are heterotrophs that break down organics. And when you break down organics, you're producing ammonia and you're freeing micronutrients, which can, a small chance, less than 10, less than 5% chance that you might start seeing an algae break because you're going to have a bunch of release of nutrients. Now you can prevent this, clean the tank. I've never seen anything bad come about by cleaning your tank. However, don't start right now. Listen to the however. Since your tank is 3 years old, the question is, how often have you been cleaning the substrate? Because if the answer is like never or not that often, chances are in 3 years that substrate has gone anaerobic, meaning reduced oxygen, or in some cases anoxic, meaning no oxygen. And the worst thing you can do is get in there and start stirring all that up, because that's going to release all sorts of trapped nutrients and phosphate and things like that is basically locked in there because it's a very stable, environment that's gotten there over time. And when you do that, when you get in there and stir everything up and add oxygen, to the system, and just by stirring it up, you're adding oxygenated water. What you can get is a bacterial bloom because you're releasing phosphate. Feel the undercurrent of today's talk, Hillary, is phosphate.
It kind of feels like it.
Yeah, which is okay because we get this a lot. Yeah, I stirred my tank up and everything, the water went cloudy, everything died. Why? Because the phosphate gets trapped in those anaerobic conditions. You stir it up, add oxygenated water, that frees the phosphate. The bacteria are going, yes, they crave it like French fries, and they start growing like crazy. That's causing a bloom. The water becomes hazy due to large numbers of bacteria in the water. And what are they also doing is they're consuming oxygen from the water. So now the oxygen level's dropping. And so corals, fish, things like that can be stressed and even die from this bacterial bloom. So if your tank is a little old and you haven't been cleaning it, I would recommend cleaning a quarter of it, one day, waiting a couple of days, cleaning another quarter, and over the process of a week to 10 days, give that tank a good cleaning. If you've got a lot of rock work, can you get in there and clean all that stuff out? Then start the EcoBalance regime, and that would be a much healthier, safer way to start rather than just relying on EcoBalance to take care of everything, because it won't. In a tank that hasn't been cleaned, in a tank with tons of organics, you're not going to get the complete probiotic benefit of the EcoBalance. Now, what eventually will happen, the idea is longer over time, you're going to have a healthier mix of bacteria. The bacteria in EcoBalance are bacteria that were isolated from aquariums. And contrary to the popular belief that the tank and nature wants to go to less diversity, and by not cleaning it, you're kind of forcing the system into the bacteria that can live in that system, which is what we don't want. We want the system to be an oxidizing, a system with lots of oxygen that supports a wider variety of bacteria. But by not cleaning it, you're forcing the system into where only a couple species of bacteria may dominate, and then they'll be the ones you don't want.
Could you say that it's kind of like eating Activia yogurt, like it's good for your gut health? You don't know, like obviously we can't see it being beneficial. We can't see the live cultures in the bacteria or in the yogurt, but we know it's good for us. The same concept for fish tanks?
Yeah, it's the same concept. Think about it. Your fish tank, we've got two different things happening. We've got all these devices that are making the water super clean, too clean, meaning devoid of bacteria. That's not good. That's like taking your gut and wiping your bacteria out every day. That is not good. We all know that right now. And then the other thing is, if you're not cleaning and you're letting the base, the substrate, the rock work under the rock, if you're not cleaning that out, that is going to migrate to one or two dominant forms of bacteria. And in those anaerobic zones, that's not the bacteria you want either. So that one part of the tank's going anaerobic, but less diverse. And then the water, you're stripping of all the nutrients or of all the bacteria. And that's why you start growing these cyanos and dinos and algae. You're kind of forcing the tank into that by not taking care of your gut, the biome in that tank. So yeah, that's exactly what's happening. If you're eating poorly, you're drinking too much, you're not varying your diet, what's happening to your gut is that you're growing the wrong types of bacteria. It's not hard. You need to eat fibrous foods, you need to eat fruits, you need to vary that diet, and that's what are called the prebiotics. The prebiotics are not bacteria. Prebiotics are what you eat to provide provide the nutrients that the bacteria in your gut need. And too much of what we do eliminates that, and that causes health issues. So it's the same thing with the aquarium. Yep.
Cool. I like that. I like when I can relate stuff to food. Like everybody understands food because, we can all relate to that. So
Yep.
Question number 12. Trying to put a small reef tank together about 20 gallons with 2 to 4 fish after cycling. People say you can't have a reef tank if you're going to use tap water from the house. They say you need to use a water filtration system, which is more than I'm willing to spend money on. Do your products allow me to use the water from the house without filtering it? I live on the south side of Chicago, and our water is provided by our town, which is treated well water. If so, what products would you recommend for me to treat the tap water?
Well, I never want to say nothing is, it can't be done. I wouldn't generally recommend this. Now, one, we have no data. Water is not water. Water is wet, but the water quality and the water constituent, what's in your water varies greatly from, the Pacific Northwest down to Florida. So not all water is created equal. Most all municipalities have to add certain chemicals, chloramines, to inhibit bacterial growth, but others add other types of chemicals. Long term, I'm not sure that this person is, doing the pound wise and penny foolish type thing. You're thinking it's going to cost a lot of money to have an RO system, but it's a 20-gallon tank. You can go buy purified water. You can go buy water from an aquarium store. I hesitate to recommend tap water because I don't know what tap water is not a consistent thing. It can vary greatly. But if that's what you want with that proviso that I'm not sure that I don't want to recommend it, is you definitely need to get rid of the chlorine and chloramine, which the first defense will do. The first defense can chelate some heavy metals. So the first product is definitely first defense. And then the one and only live nitrifying bacteria, you're just going to have to experiment with, 4 fish in a 20-gallon aquarium. They're going to have to be small. They're not going to be large marine fish. That's for sure. And you've got to look at what the phosphates and nitrate values of your tap water is. And it's like, how would nitrate get in there? Well, chloramines have an amine in there, and it's been shown repeatedly that nitrifying bacteria live on the distribution pipes, the water distribution pipes. And so a lot of times, by the time drinking water gets to your home, it can have high levels of nitrate in it, even if it's well water, just because of how they're treating it. So you got to do a little bit of homework. And the systems to use of the chemical or the bacteria, one and only. Eventually waste away. The waste away gels will help clean up things, and definitely the first defense to treat the water is what I recommend.
Okay, I like that. I think that'll wrap up our questions for this podcast, but obviously we've got a couple more ready to go for the next podcast. If you have questions, please send them in, email us info@drtimsaquatics.com or send it to us on Instagram. We will happily get them on our list.
Yep. And I think a topic, we had a live stream on the hydroponic aquaponic system. So maybe we add that to the mix and talk about what the differences are those. And there's more and more interest of doing hydroponics and aquaponics. What do those terms mean? They're distinct terms, with definitions, which, drives me crazy when the aquarium industry and the prolific people out there on the internet within the industry or hobbies want to change what the definitions of things are.
Yes.
Yeah. But we should schedule that too. But
yep, I like that.
Yeah. So, and next up is Reefapalooza, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for me, but you've got RazTech coming up next, right?
RazTech is right before in Orlando. I'll be giving a talk on hydroponics and aquaponics, large scale systems. They're producing massive amounts of vegetables and fish in these types of systems. And then that weekend is Reefapalooza, and we are the new raffle sponsor. And we got some Dr. Tim stuff, and we've got some ASF pumps and things like that we can add to that. It's always a great time. So please look it up. Reefapalooza in Orlando is always fun. So come out and say hi.
Yes. It's such a good show, and it's in Florida, man. It's nice and sunny.
It was cold this last trip. Well, not as cold as other.
The first few days it was kind of chilly, but the sun was out. I'm happy for the sun.
All right. So that's what, yes, we've gotten way too much water in California. Yes, I know we needed it, but that doesn't mean I like it. I'm not a rain person. So full disclosure. I love water, but I don't want it on top of me like that. I'd rather be underneath scuba diving.
Fair.
Okay. All right, everybody. This has been Dr. Tim and Hillary for another session of Dr. Tim's Aquatics Podcast. Please follow us on all the different social media and come visit us at a show. Until next time, good fish keep.